The unseen hand, I found an old school diary, grades, and a chilling threat from a classmate. Chapter 1, Dust and Memories. Richmond, Virginia, 2024. The attic was a mausoleum of memories, a dusty repository of lives lived and forgotten. Sunlight filtered through a grimy window, illuminated motes dancing in the stale air. My grandmother, Clara May, God rest her soul, had been a hoarder of histories, a meticulous cataloger of every scrap of paper that held a whisper of the past. After her passing, a task I had both dreaded and yearned for had fallen to me. Clearing out her sprawling Victorian home, room by room, memory by memory. I'm Eleanor Vance, 38 years old, a historian specializing in obscure local archives. My life was spent sifting through the detritus of time, piecing together narratives from fragmented documents. Yet, dealing with my own family's past felt strangely more daunting than any research project. Clara May had been a vibrant, fiercely independent woman, full of stories, yet some parts of her past remained stubbornly vague, almost deliberately obscured. Her youthful romance, the mystery of my mother's true parentage, these were whispers I had only begun to uncover through her recently discovered journal. Today, however, I wasn't searching for grand family secrets. I was simply trying to clear out the attic. It was a labyrinth of forgotten furniture, trunks filled with moth-eaten linens, and boxes piled high with books, photographs, and what seemed like every single Christmas card ever received since 1950. Deep in a forgotten corner, beneath a pile of old quilts, I found a small, unassuming wooden box. It was plain, unvarnished, unlike the intricate puzzle box that had held Clara May's most profound secrets. This one was simply latched. Inside, nestled among a few faded ribbons and a pressed flower, was a school diary. It was small, with a stiff dark blue cover, the kind ubiquitous in the 1980s. The year embossed in gold on the front read, 1988. My mother, Evelyn Clarke, would have been 14 that year, the same age my daughter, Lily, was now. A pang of tenderness shot through me. Mom had passed away recently, a raw wound in my heart. This was a tangible link to her youth, a glimpse into her formative years before I existed. I lifted the diary carefully. Its pages were yellowed, brittle at the edges. I recognized my mother's neat, almost meticulous handwriting, filling in grades, homework assignments, and occasional notes about school events. As I flipped through the first few pages, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. Math test, B+, English essay, A-, history quiz, C. Ugh! It was typical teenage fare, a mundane record of a high school student's daily life in Atlanta, Georgia, where Mom grew up. Then, on a page from mid-October, beneath a perfectly ordinary entry about a science project, my eye caught something different. Not my mother's handwriting. Bold, jagged, angry letters, scrawled in black ink, spilling across the ruled lines, almost tearing through the paper. It wasn't just a note. It was a visceral intrusion. Clarke, you think you're so smart, don't you? You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. J. My breath caught in my throat. A chill, cold and sharp, snaked down my spine. This wasn't a playful prank. This was a threat. Raw, menacing, unequivocal, and signed with a single initial, J. Who was J? What had my mother done to provoke such venom? My mind, trained to seek connections and uncover hidden narratives, immediately started spinning. My mother, Evelyn, had been universally loved, a beacon of kindness and warmth. The idea of her having an enemy, let alone one capable of such malice, felt utterly alien. Yet here it was, stark and undeniable, a violent tremor in the quiet, mundane record of her youth. The threat itself was vague. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." Regret what? Make sure on what? The questions hung in the dusty air of the attic, unsettling and persistent. This wasn't just a diary anymore. It was a puzzle, a chilling, personal mystery, stretching back decades, reaching out from the past to disturb the quiet comfort of my present. The simple act of clearing out an attic had unexpectedly unearthed a dark, unspoken secret from my mother's youth, a secret that pulsed with an unsettling energy, demanding to be understood. Chapter 2: The Echo of a Name. The ominous message in the diary, signed with a stark J, pulsed with an unsettling energy, shattering the serene image I had of my mother's youth. My fingers traced the jagged letters, a chilling connection to a past I knew nothing about. Who was J, and what had my gentle, kind mother done to incur such a menacing threat? I continued flipping through the diary, my initial nostalgia replaced by a desperate urgency. I looked for more entries from J, for any clues, any mentions of conflict, but there was nothing. The entries continued in my mother's neat hand, a perfectly normal record of assignments and grades, as if the threat had never happened. It was an island of menace in a sea of banality, making it all the more unsettling. My mother, Evelyn, had always been popular. She was vibrant, intelligent, a natural leader. I couldn't imagine her in a serious conflict. This threat felt personal, deep-seated. It wasn't the kind of thing a teenage girl just shrugs off. Yet, she never mentioned it, not once. It was a carefully buried secret. I began to research my mother's high school yearbooks, which I also found in the attic. The 1988 yearbook was thick, filled with grinning faces and optimistic aspirations. I scanned the junior class section, searching for anyone whose name began with J. There were several: Jessica, James, John, Jennifer, Jason. Too many to narrow down without further information. I looked at the faculty list. Any teachers with the initial J? Mr. Johnson, the chemistry teacher. Mrs. Jenkins, the English teacher. Unlikely, but not impossible. My grandmother's attic, once a place of comforting memories, now felt like a repository of unresolved tension. The air, usually thick with the scent of aged paper and wood, seemed to carry a faint, metallic tang of an old, lingering fear. I decided to start with my mother's closest friends from high school. There was Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, who had moved to California years ago, and then Martha Jenkins, née Peterson, Mom's best friend from high school, who still lived in Savannah, Georgia, a few hours' drive from Richmond. I remembered Martha vividly from family gatherings, a woman with a boisterous laugh and a keen memory. I called Aunt Carol first. I explained what I found, reading her the chilling message. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Evelyn," she murmured, her voice tinged with a deep sadness. She always carried so much more than she let on. "Aunt Carol, do you know who Jay is?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "Jay, Jay," she mused, a faraway look in her voice. "There was a boy, Jeremy Vance." My breath hitched. Vance, the name again. My family's convoluted history with the Vance family had always been a source of uneasy fascination. Elias Vance, the manipulative psychologist behind Whispering Pines. The man who had tried to erase my daughter Lily's personality was my mother's cousin. My grandmother Clara May's brother Arthur was Elias's father. Arthur had orchestrated the secret adoption of my mother, Eleanor, who was Clara May's daughter, not niece, to protect the family name. The Vance family, it seemed, had a long, dark history of control and manipulation. "Jeremy Vance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How is he related to Elias?" "He's Elias's younger brother," Aunt Carol explained. "A few years younger. He was in Evelyn's class, I believe. Always a bit odd, quiet, very intense. His father, Arthur, was quite strict with him, always pushing him to excel, to be perfect." There was a lot of pressure on those boys. A chilling thread. Jeremy Vance, the younger brother of Elias Vance, the same family. My mother, Evelyn, had grown up alongside the future architect of a child reprogramming camp, a family consumed by control and the erasing of failures. "What happened between Mom and Jeremy?" I asked, the urgency in my voice undeniable. Aunt Carol sighed. "I don't know the specifics, honey. Evelyn was always tight-lipped about anything truly upsetting. But I do remember her being particularly stressed that fall. She spent a lot of time studying, more than usual, and she seemed to avoid Jeremy. It was strange. They used to be friendly, or at least polite. But after that fall semester, she just steered clear of him. I assumed it was just teenage drama, a spat over a test, or a crush. But you'll regret this? That sounds more serious. A test, a grade. The diary entry was on a page detailing grades. Was it about academics? Was Jay jealous of my mother's intelligence? The possibility chilled me. Elias Vance's obsessive desire to repattern and control came from somewhere. Perhaps it was a family trait, passed down, festering in the shadows. I thanked Aunt Carol, my mind racing. Jeremy Vance. The name echoed, linking the past to the present, a menacing shadow extending from my mother's youth to my daughter's recent trauma. This wasn't just a random threat. This was part of a larger, darker narrative. I needed to speak to Martha. She would have been closer to the ground, more aware of the intricate social dynamics of their high school. She might hold the key to unlocking the true meaning behind Jay's chilling words. The dust of the attic had not just yielded a memory, it had opened a terrifying portal to an unresolved past. A past that still held a chilling grip on the present. Chapter 3. The Echo in the Halls. The discovery of Jeremy Vance's identity. Elias Vance's younger brother cast a long, cold shadow over the quiet comfort of my grandmother's house. The familial connection, the insidious thread of control woven through the Vance lineage, was chillingly apparent. My mother's youthful diary, once a quaint artifact, now felt like a sinister warning. I drove down to Savannah, Georgia, a city steeped in history. Its charming squares and Spanish moss-draped trees belied the secrets they might hold. Martha Peterson greeted me with her usual warm embrace, her eyes still holding the sparkle of shared memories with my mother. Over sweet tea on her porch, I carefully laid out the diary, showing her the ominous entry. Martha's eyes widened as she read the threat. "Jeremy Vance," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh, Evelyn, she never told you about that, did she?" "No," I replied, my voice tight. "She never mentioned him, or this." "What happened, Martha? What did she do?" Martha sighed. A deep, weary sound. It was the fall of '88, our junior year. Evelyn was brilliant, as you know, always top of the class. Jeremy, he was also smart, but not like Evelyn. He was driven, intensely so, but it seemed to come from a place of fear, not joy. His father, Arthur Vance, was a force of nature. He pushed those boys mercilessly. Perfection was the only acceptable outcome. It was notoriously difficult. Evelyn, being Evelyn, offered to tutor him. She was always helping people. She tutored him? I interjected, a cold premonition forming. Yes, they spent hours together after school in the library. For weeks. Then the midterm exam. It was brutal. Everyone struggled, except Evelyn. She aced it, the only one. Jeremy, he failed, spectacularly. A fresh wave of dread washed over me. He blamed her, didn't he? Martha nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. He confronted her in the hallway. Screamed at her, really. Said she sabotaged him. That she deliberately gave him wrong information or held back on purpose just to make herself look better. It was absurd. Evelyn would never. But he was so consumed by his own failure, by the fear of his father's reaction, that he twisted it into her fault. He accused her of undermining him, of betraying his trust. And he wrote this in her diary, I concluded, pointing to the entry. Did he follow through? Did he do anything? He tried, Martha said, her voice dropping. He started a whisper campaign against her. Little things at first. Spreading rumors about her being a know-it-all, implying she cheated on the exam. He tried to turn other students against her. It mostly failed. Everyone knew Evelyn was too kind, too honest. But it hurt her. She felt betrayed. She tried to talk to him, to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He just doubled down on his accusations. And then, I urged, then, something bigger. Evelyn was campaigning for student council president. She was a shoo-in. She had strong support. But a few weeks before the election, anonymous flyers started appearing around school. Nasty things, accusing Evelyn of being a cheat, a liar, someone who stepped on others to get ahead. They were crude, but vicious. Everyone suspected Jeremy. The language, the vitriol, it felt like him. He never admitted it, of course. Always played the innocent victim. Did she win? I asked. My heart pounding. No, Martha said, her voice filled with lingering sadness. She pulled out. The smear campaign, the constant whispers. She was exhausted. She said she couldn't lead effectively if her integrity was constantly under attack. It broke her heart. She worked so hard for that. It was the only time I ever saw Evelyn truly defeated. She just withdrew for a while. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just a teenage spat. This was a calculated, malicious attack. He tried to erase her, didn't he? I murmured, the chilling echo of Elias Vance's practices reverberating in my mind. Erase her reputation, her confidence, her joy. Erase her? Martha looked at me, puzzled. I explained the connection to Elias Vance, his Whispering Pines camp, his obsession with erasing undesirable traits, and the family legacy of control, starting with Arthur Vance and his manipulation of Clara May's story. Martha listened, her face growing paler with each revelation. My God, she finally whispered, it's a pattern. Arthur controlled Clara May. Elias controlled those children. And Jeremy, he tried to control Evelyn. He couldn't stand her light, her innate goodness, her success. He wanted to dim it, to tarnish it, to make her suffer because he himself was suffering under his father's pressure. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture. Jeremy Vance, always. The diary entry, initially a cryptic threat, was now a window into a profound and painful chapter of my mother's youth. It revealed not just Jeremy Vance's malice, but my mother's silent strength, her resilience in the face of targeted cruelty. It explained why she championed kindness so fiercely, why she fought so hard for justice, why she believed in building up instead of tearing down. She had learned the hard way the devastating impact of an unseen hand, wielding power through manipulation and deceit, and she had, in her own quiet way, spent her life pushing back against it. This diary, this simple blue book, held not just a hidden threat, but a testament to my mother's extraordinary character. Chapter 4: The Ripple Effect. The conversation with Martha left me shaken, yet with a profound sense of clarity. The seemingly isolated threat in my mother's diary was a crucial thread in the larger, insidious tapestry woven by the Vance family. Jeremy's malice, born of insecurity and his father Arthur's rigid demands for perfection, was a precursor to his brother Elias's full-blown, institutionalized psychological manipulation. My mother, Evelyn, had been an early victim of this chilling family trait, the desire to control, to erase anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of order and success. I returned to Clara May's attic, the diary now feeling like a sacred text. I revisited her journal entries, particularly those that touched upon her brother, Arthur. Clara May, in her quiet way, expressed a deep sadness about Arthur's inflexibility, his inability to embrace life's messiness, his obsession with appearances. She wrote of his cold logic and his fear of anything that threatened his ordered world. This fear, amplified in his sons, had metastasized into something truly destructive. My mother's "everything's going to be fine" mantra, which I had only recently understood as her defiant battle cry against terminal illness, now took on another layer of meaning. It wasn't just about her health. It was her lifelong antidote to the venomous negativity she had encountered in Jeremy Vance. She had chosen optimism, kindness, and belief in others as a shield, a deliberate counter-narrative to the one he had tried to impose on her. Her resilience wasn't just physical. It was deeply emotional and spiritual. The diary, Clara May's journal, Liam's letters, these documents weren't just historical artifacts. They were living testaments to the resilience of our family, the quiet strength that ran through the women in my lineage. They were also a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked control and the insidious nature of psychological manipulation. I started a new research project, one that combined my professional expertise with my personal revelations. I began meticulously documenting the history of tough love camps and coercive control groups in America. I delved into the psychological theories behind behavioral modification and deprogramming. My work, once purely academic, now had a fierce personal urgency. I wasn't just a historian. I was an archivist of trauma, a chronicler of resilience, driven by a desire to ensure no other family suffered as mine had. I worked closely with the legal team handling the case against Elias Vance and Whispering Pines. My detailed research into the Vance family's historical patterns of control provided a crucial context for Elias's actions, demonstrating a generational predisposition towards manipulation and a warped definition of order. It helped the prosecution establish a pattern of behavior, bolstering their case. My testimony, backed by evidence from my mother's diary and Clara May's journal, helped to paint a picture of a deeply disturbed individual whose therapeutic practices were rooted in a dark familial ideology. The trial was long, grueling, and emotionally draining. Lily, still in therapy, bravely provided her own testimony, her voice still fragile, but growing stronger with each word. Seeing her stand tall, recounting the trauma inflicted upon her, was both agonizing and immensely proud. She was reclaiming her narrative, one painful memory at a time. The legal team presented Maya's affidavit, Alex's messages, and my own comprehensive research. The evidence was overwhelming. Elias Vance, arrogant and unrepentant, maintained his innocence, claiming he was simply rehabilitating troubled youth. But the jury saw through his facade. He was found guilty on multiple counts of child endangerment and psychological abuse. Whispering Pines was permanently shut down, its assets seized, and former campers began receiving the long-overdue therapeutic support they needed. It was a victory, hard-won and deeply satisfying, but it couldn't erase the scars. Jeremy Vance, by this point, was a reclusive, bitter old man living in Jacksonville, Florida. I considered confronting him, showing him the diary, but Martha advised against it. "He's not worth your energy, Eleanor," she said gently. "He never truly processed his own failures. He's likely still living in that same bitterness. Your mother chose to rise above it. That's her legacy. Don't let his shadow dim your light." I realized she was right. My focus needed to be on healing, not on retribution. The diary had served its purpose. It had revealed a hidden truth and empowered me to fight for my daughter. The media coverage of the trial brought new attention to our family's story. Journalists, intrigued by the multi-generational threads, reached out for interviews. I decided to speak out, not for sensationalism, but to shed light on the insidious nature of such camps and the importance of family history in understanding present-day challenges. I shared parts of Claire May's journal, the story of Liam, the true parentage of my mother, and the devastating impact of Arthur's interference. I spoke about Jeremy Vance's bullying and the strength my mother showed in overcoming it. I spoke about Lily's journey, her bravery, and her ongoing healing. The response was overwhelming. Parents reached out, sharing their own stories, seeking guidance. Former campers found solace in Lily's narrative, recognizing their own struggles. My research, once a personal quest, evolved into a public advocacy, working with legislators to strengthen laws against coercive control camps, ensuring they faced strict oversight and accountability. My daughter Lily's recovery was a long, arduous path, but she faced it with the same quiet strength I had learned ran deep in our family. She started journaling herself, slowly, tentatively, beginning to write her own narrative, reclaiming her voice. She still had moments of flatness, of detachment, but they were fewer and always followed by an emerging spark of her true self. Her sarcastic wit returned, her passion for art reignited. She started attending a support group for former camp attendees, finding solidarity and shared understanding. One evening, a year after her return, Lily found the diary in my study. She picked it up, curiosity in her eyes. "Is this Grandma Evelyn's?" she asked. "Yes, sweet pea," I replied, my heart full. "It is. It tells a story about her, about bravery, about a difficult time." She opened it, flipping through the pages. I watched her, my breath held. She stopped at the chilling entry, her brow furrowing. "Who's Jay, Mom?" she asked, her voice soft. I sat beside her, taking her hand. "Jay," I began, "was someone who tried to dim your grandmother's light. Someone who tried to make her feel small, to take away her joy. Just like someone tried to do to you." I paused, then continued. "But your Grandma Evelyn, she was a fighter. She always found her way back to her own light. And so did you, my brave girl. So did you." Lily looked at me, then back at the diary. Her fingers traced the angry letters, but this time, her eyes held not fear, but a flicker of understanding, a quiet resolve. The ripple effect of the past, of hidden truths and malicious intent, had been powerfully felt through generations. But so too had the ripple effect of love, of resilience, of an unwavering spirit. The diary, once a symbol of a hidden threat, now stood as a testament to our family's enduring strength, a reminder that even in the face of unseen hands, a light within us and the truth will always find a way to shine. Chapter 5: Reclaiming the Narrative. The conviction of Elias Vance brought a fragile sense of closure, but the true work lay in healing. For Lily, for our family, and for the broader community impacted by tough love camps, the school diary, now a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience, remained a poignant artifact, a constant reminder of the unseen battles fought across generations. Lily's journey back to herself was gradual, marked by small, profound victories. Dr. Sharma continued to guide her, helping her process the trauma of the re-education. Lily began to articulate the chilling details of her time at Whispering Pines, recalling the constant surveillance, the forced isolation, the relentless thought processing, sessions where her individuality was systematically dismantled. The positive affirmations they forced upon her, designed to replace her own thoughts, slowly began to unravel as she reclaimed her internal narrative. She found strength in connecting with other survivors of Whispering Pines through online forums and local support groups. Sharing their stories, validating each other's experiences, became a powerful part of their collective healing. Many, like Lily, struggled with a pervasive sense of distrust and a deep-seated fear of external control. But together, they learned to rebuild their sense of agency, to trust their own instincts again. For me, the diary became a catalyst for deeper historical exploration. I expanded my research beyond just coercive camps, delving into the broader history of psychological manipulation, cults, and societal attempts to correct or control individuals deemed deviant or unruly. I found disturbing parallels between historical practices and the modern tactics used by Elias Vance. My grandmother Clara May's struggles, my mother Evelyn's encounter with Jeremy Vance, and Lily's trauma were not isolated incidents, but part of a continuous, sometimes hidden, thread of human behavior. My articles, initially focused on the Whispering Pines case, evolved into a broader series for a national magazine, exposing the dark underbelly of the troubled teen industry. I interviewed former staff from other camps, survivors from decades past, and the parents who had unwittingly sent their children into these manipulative environments. My work aimed not just to inform, but to empower, to give a voice to those who had been silenced. I emphasized the importance of critical thinking, of questioning glossy promises, and of trusting one's instincts when something feels fundamentally wrong. The legal victory against Elias Vance spurred a wave of new legislation proposals. I became an advocate, testifying before state and federal committees, pushing for stricter regulations, mandatory licensing, independent oversight, and clear guidelines for therapeutic programs involving minors. It was a long, uphill battle against powerful lobbying groups, but the stories of Lily and countless others provided undeniable human evidence of the need for change. One evening, while working on a new article, I came across an old newspaper clipping from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution archives, dating back to 1990. It was a small obituary for Arthur Vance, Elias and Jeremy's father. It mentioned his long and distinguished career in law and his dedication to civic order. A chillingly ironic phrase, given the chaos and control he had sown in his own family and beyond. The obituary also briefly mentioned his two sons, Elias and Jeremy, both described as promising. The promising sons who had carried on his dark legacy in their own twisted ways. As Lily continued to heal, she started to find her voice again, not just in conversation, but creatively. She began drawing again, but her art was different, darker, more profound, exploring themes of control, identity, and reclamation. Her art became a powerful form of therapy, a visual representation of her internal battle and her journey to rediscover herself. She created a series of powerful graphic novel panels, depicting her camp experience with raw honesty, transforming her trauma into art. She even started talking about her father, David. He had visited her regularly during her therapy, his initial dismissal of my concerns replaced by a deep, heartbreaking remorse once he understood the true extent of the damage. He recognized his own part in enabling the situation, blinded by his desire for a quick fix. Their relationship was slowly, carefully being rebuilt, founded on a new level of honesty and vulnerability. The school diary, the small blue book with its chilling threat, lay open on my desk one day as Lily walked past. She paused, picked it up, and flipped to the infamous page. She looked at the jagged J. "He was just a kid too, wasn't he, Mom?" she said softly, her voice carrying a newfound wisdom. Hurt and trying to hurt someone else. My heart swelled. My daughter, who had been stripped of her empathy and replaced with programmed responses, was now offering compassion for her tormentor's tormentor. It was a sign of true healing, a testament to her profound capacity for understanding. "Yes, sweet pea," I replied, tears welling in my eyes. He was. Hurt people often hurt people, but it doesn't excuse it. It just explains it. Lily nodded, her eyes distant for a moment. Then she looked at me, a soft, resolute smile on her face. "But we don't have to be like them, right?" "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "No, we don't. We get to choose who we are. We get to choose to heal. We get to choose to shine." And in that moment, I realized the full scope of the legacy. Not the dark, controlling legacy of the Vance family, but the quiet, resilient legacy of the women in our family. Clara May, who faced abandonment and societal judgment with quiet strength. Evelyn, who battled illness and malicious bullying with unwavering optimism. And now, Lily, who had stared into the void of identity erasure and fought her way back to her authentic self. The school diary, a fragment from the past, had not just revealed a hidden threat, but had become a beacon, illuminating the enduring power of truth, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of a family that, despite all odds, chose light over shadow, love over control, and healing over resentment. The unseen hand of the past had tried to grasp us, but we had, together, broken free.